Hello, everybody. My apparent name is Terry Oldfield, and I've had a long career as a musician. My main instruments are wind instruments, particularly the flute, and I've traveled a lot in the world. I now live in Australia. I have a very famous brother called Mike. Oh, his second name's Oldfield. And he plays the tubular bells. No, he doesn't. He plays the guitar, mainly. So he's my little brother. He's 4 years younger, and he's living a very happy life somewhere, the location of which I will not divulge, because he doesn't like to be found these days too easily. He's also had a very, very busy life. I think he spent most of the 80s and 90s on the road playing his music, and he's done a good job getting it out there. He deserves some peace now. So my life now is pretty quiet. I wake up in the morning. I don't usually have any plans at all, although I have a partner, Soraya, who is a lot busier than me with her work. We're running a 3-day retreat here starting tomorrow morning, actually. We have people arriving. We've got a caterer. We've got all that sort of stuff happening, but it doesn't feel like I'm doing anything. And Jon will probably be able to explain what I mean by that, because doing has sort of ended for me. But there's a lot of things being done. I do quite a bit of gardening. I enjoy getting out there and weeding and doing stuff. I occasionally pick up a flute and play it, which I'll be doing every day for the next 3 days for about probably 2 or 3 hours. So I'm not lazy, but I just feel like life is very quiet. Against all odds, peace has found me. And I don't know how it happened, because it didn't happen as an experience. It just was suddenly there. You see, I reached a place of what I would call now an understanding of a final truth. But that was just to persuade the mind to relax. You've reached the end of your searching. You've got the truth. I am is a good way to describe it. I just am. I am. Okay. And anything added to that I am, by the way, is what creates all the problems, you see. So I haven't written any music for some time, but occasionally that comes as well. I started work on a project during the recent troubles, I would call them, where one couldn't travel and one had to do certain things and all that. I won't go into that in detail. But I suddenly felt that I could use this technique, I suppose you could call it. You call it a technique or a practice of allowing everything in and allowing the body, which I feel as a sensing mechanism, which actually creates the universe, by the way. That sounds a bit of a tall thing to say, but we go into that in a lot more detail in the podcast, by the way. But and also I find I have these little blanks, and I don't think it's Alzheimer's kicking in. It's just the brain is thinking in a different way, and it sort of comes through in wodges. A wodge is an English word meaning sort of clumps or groups of ideas. So the body as a sensing mechanism is, when it's really open to sense everything as it is, starts to live in a totally different way. So what we've been talking about in this podcast, these many conversations that I've had with Jon, is a different way of living. A way of living that is no longer awareness confined to a human body. It's awareness walking through life containing a human body, and also at times containing everything around. So on an experiential level, the nearest way I could describe this is to be walking around with a VR headset on, and everything around is like a bubble, and all the stuff appears on the walls of the bubble as a kind of ephemeral casing. You see, the bottom line truth that came with the understanding was not a living realization of that understanding yet, because it takes a bit of getting used to when you understand that nothing is real. This whole universe is a mental creation. It's a conceptual world. And we can go to science for agreement on this, because there's no way that science has yet been able to prove that matter exists. So that helps me a little bit. So a different way of living where nothing is wrong. Everything is just the way it is. And how this body responds to the way it is just what happens. And I get called on to do all sorts of stuff. You know, I walk on the beach, I do this, I do that, you know, I go shopping, I do everything exactly the same, but it's a totally different, totally non-boring way of living. If you're bored with life, you know, open up and have everything that is on offer. Because if you have everything that's on offer, you're never going to be bored, because it's a smorgasbord being offered. you got a bit of everything all the time. The birds singing, the sun shining. If you really start to get bored, just look around. I mean, this none of this is real. This is amazing. It's incredible. There's no way that you could ever conjure this up. Nobody could design this. It's you call it a VR headset just for convenience, but it's like the difference between one of these AI robots that you stick on a table, and it's got eyes and ears, and it's got all the wires that show through the neck, and yes, I am a robot, and I think we robots should be equal to you human beings, and yes, and we're going to be able to. It's just a program. It's an enormous difference. So nothing can compare with nature. Nothing. And that sense of wonder will come back when you have the courage to face the music. This is what we've been talking about. And it's almost impossible to share this unless you open up your door a bit, you see. Because if your door's closed, there's nothing is going to come in that will help you.
I'm actually delighted to be here with you today, because it was, I guess, a year and a half, more or less now, that I sent you a text around the time that you were about to publish your biography. And I thought it could be an interesting idea to ask you a few questions in podcast format, and maybe use that as a sort of promotion for the book. And that took us into a whole 13 one-hour conversations about many things not related to your book, which was more interesting. And that project evolved in which now is called Facing the Music, which is, I like to call it an audio portrait of you. Each episode being a bit of one more line in the drawing. And it has been a bit of a journey, and we are on the other end of completing the edits, and I think it has surprised us both. So maybe it's a good idea that we introduce people that are going to listen to this a bit. How has it been? Why did we do it? And I don't think we had a why, but I don't know. You tell me.
Well, I think the title "Facing the Music" is a good place to start, because I wrote the book as what was an honest recollection of the story of Terry Oldfield, who we could go into this in more detail, but it is actually a fictitious character, which is based upon the memory of past events. And when we start to face the music, we are actually at a point where we're caught up with this story, because if we keep retelling the story of the past, we're never able to experience the present moment. So when we came up with this title, Facing the Music, I thought that's perfect, because as soon as we stop recreating and reproducing the character in the story, trying to recreate that in the present moment, which is futile and complete waste of energy, because the universe goes on flowing, like a river. And meanwhile, we're treading water, trying to sort of keep the story going. I'm Terry. I did this, and I'm a musician, and I play flutes, and I know my brother's Mike Oldfield, and all that sort of stuff that's going on all the time. And until we stop doing that, in other words, turn and face the music, we will not be able to be carried in the current of life. So when we actually pluck up courage and turn that gaze away from the past and away from the future, we suddenly get hit with the barrage from the dam that we had built just above us to hold back the residue from that enormous flow that we thought we could control. And so when we turn to face the music, we're going to be hit with an enormous challenge. And we talked a lot about my challenge, or the challenge in the story, but that is an ongoing thing. The challenge is continuing in every moment. But now I'm available to face the challenge, you see. Whereas before I was storing it all up for a later date when I'd be conscious enough or well enough or strong enough to deal with it. And you could say that in a nutshell, that's what we've been talking about.
My experience with that was I started our conversations wanting to know more about the character Terry Oldfield, and I asked you a lot of questions about many different aspects of that history. Your beginnings in music. We have an entire episode dedicated to your first piece of music, Spiral. Some anecdotes with Richard Branson and your brother Mike, and many different aspects of that history and biography. So people will be able to listen to some of that, because there's a bit of that in the conversations. But mainly, as you pointed out, like around 70% of everything that we talked about veered back or returned to exactly facing the music. All of that is, in a way, fictitious and anecdotal and has no substance. And personally, that took me for a ride. I didn't see that coming. I think the first 5 conversations, I was still trying to have a regular interview, and I was failing miserably. So I think it was around our 6th conversation that I went like, okay, I'm in. I'm gonna let this river flow wherever it may. And it is only now that I listen to all of the different episodes that I sense a certain peace, a certain vibe that is always in the present moment. No matter how stressful my day is, if I listen to one of the episodes, immediately I step back into a place of peace, beauty, stillness, and it puts a smile on my face. And that doesn't happen often with, let's say, internet content, which normally has an agenda, has a point, has an interest to position a character or a brand or position a product or something like that. So I'm quite surprised that what came on the other end is something like nothing I've listened to.
Well, I've always used music, or music for me has always been a way of expressing my feelings in the moment, which is why I do a lot of improvisation and don't have a lot of strong form to the music. And I think that was how I managed to get into this niche of ambient relaxation, and people started using it for their meditation and their yoga and their massage and all the alternative stuff, because it connected, because it was an expression from this emotional body. All the angst and the suffering and the difficult times that I went through was expressed in that music. Then you've heard of the way that in music resonance happens naturally, between instruments. Like if you play something in a room and a gong will start vibrating over in the corner, and lots of people have done experiments with this. But the energy of music is just vibration, and so people respond to that from the same place, so they can relate on the same level, which is why I think certain pieces of music really hit the spot, because they resonate with it. And this can happen also with any kind of art form, in the moment. The Van Gogh chair, famous images that were a reflection of something that was happening that was really quite authentic in the moment. And where we run into trouble in our lives is that we try to be what we think will please others. So I could easily come up with lots of examples of that in my life, because I wrote film music for quite some time. I had to please the producers and the directors and the editors, and everybody needed to be pleased. And so I had to come up with the goods. And that wasn't coming from here, it was coming from here. And so it became a kind of stressful activity. And in my 40s, I ended up having to take a big break from everything, because I got myself into a state. It's a very simple thing, really, to realize that you have to go through what you have to go through. You can't store it up, because it just gets worse. And you end up taking drugs, antidepressants, sleeping pills, all that sort of stuff. It's so common these days. And this is where I think that we can help people by telling that story, especially when it's connected with music, because that music was an authentic representation of how I felt at the time. So if we talk about a memory and then put the music of that time with it, it gives it an enormous power, because that music is continuing. It has survived the maelstrom, and it's still able to be reproduced. Whereas memories are very difficult to reproduce as an experience. And music can be reproduced as a repeating experience. So we've got all the golden oldies, that everybody loves, because when they first listen to that, they have an association with the time of hearing it, and it takes, it's enormously powerful. So the spoken word with music, like what we've been recording, I feel is something which is very powerful, and it can accentuate what we're talking about in a very powerful way, and I think maybe help people to stay strong and face the music.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing how people feel when they listen to this, what sort of thoughts and emotions and reactions and come up, because I've been surprised with my own reactions and the entire journey, and you've been showing this to some of your friends and family, and I've been doing the same, and the feedback is beautiful so far. So
well,
I'm
there was no
really looking forward.
There was no planning in this, was there, John?
Well, I had plans. You kept breaking them. So
well, because you cannot talk of something which doesn't have any relation to the present moment, because if you keep seeing things with this vision, which is very simple, it's a constant letting go of having fixed ideas about things. And so that allows us to interact in a way which is a bit different, especially when you go away and you can edit it and get rid of all the dross.
Yes. I have to say that part of the dross was my interventions. There's nothing of me in the entire material, which I think it was a good decision as a producer. I'm glad
it was your decision. I would have felt a bit bad about that. Sorry, John, you cannot be in it.
You cannot be in it. As executive director of this project, you're out, but keep editing. No, it came about naturally when I was editing the Spiral special. And I felt it was very sweet that your career started with Spiral, and that this project took form also thanks to Spiral, because what happened was we recorded an interview, you speaking about that piece of music, and I managed to make it a sort of commentary on top of the Spiral piece, and that's when everything clicked for me. And then I tried to do the same with our first conversation, when you speak about Terry as a fictitious character that is constantly disappearing, and I mixed that with your piece On Fire, which talks about that. And that was the starting point of this format. It's like, yes, this works in a very strange and magical way. So I think people will find themselves in conversation with you directly, answering to questions that are not explicitly put forth, which opens up a space of a certain magic, because it's a conversation with no goal, but with a lot of content. And I think it's going to be beautiful.
This is probably why I don't have a lot of friends, John. Because if I constantly talk in this way to people, they don't like it in general. So it's been a great luxury to be able to talk to you, because I feel a kind of receptivity there, which is very rare, actually.
Yes, I mean, it caught me by surprise. We met. I think it was 2017. When that's kind of a long time ago. It's 6 years now, and we organized a concert here in Spain, and then we did a a second one. And then you invited us as well to another concert near Gibraltar in the Soto Grande area, south of Spain. And I kept thinking, this is a really interesting man. I knew you as the character, the musician, the composer, the brother of Mike, all of that, childhood hero. I started listening to your music when I was, I think, 16, 17. It's like, wow. And the more we went into these conversations, the more I couldn't help but feel that my heart was opening. I normally left our conversation, our recording, in a sort of floaty state. And sometimes I couldn't do much for a couple of hours after our recording, because I left that space of do your days scheduled this way. You have these goals to attain, and I would speak from this place, or I would listen to you speak from this place for, let's say, an hour, and I would just leave the room in a sort of floaty, in love, enlightened state. Like, okay, what do I do now? I would normally go for a walk next to the river near my house, and it's like, okay, everything is perfect as it is. So that receptivity was very much also induced by the space that the conversations created. And I hope that we have managed to translate that into the recordings and the edits with your music. And that's my hope. If I have any hope or any goal in mind, is that other people will catch that glimpse of nowness and perfection and beauty.
Well, it's the key is to stop, and the word stop has such a powerful meaning for different people. I mean, it can mean anything, but stop, which means stop recreating the same stuff. It's like any musician who writes a song. The temptation is for the patterns to be recreated in the next piece. And that's, to a certain extent, that's nice, because you can do variations on a theme. But if you really want something new to come through, you have to stop being the thing that keeps repeating and allow the open door to let it in. And when we allow the door to open, it's very scary to begin with, because what comes through that door is all the residue, all the stuff we haven't actually been able to face in the past. But there's an expression I quite like, that we never get given more than we can handle. And that's by the grace of whoever it is, And so if we know that we can handle it, the only way of handling it is to stay in the present moment. And that's when we start to when it really starts to kick in. Because as soon as we have resistance to that flow, we try to close the door again. And once it's open, it really doesn't want to close again, because the power coming through that door is so powerful. It's like trying to open the door of a car underwater. You can't. It takes even more energy to try to keep it at bay. So when we really do open up, a kind of power comes in. Call it grace or whatever you will. A kind of power comes in to support that openness, because whoever we are wants to be open. Anyway, so there's an introduction to the Terry Oldfield story.